Recording on, so I'm turning the recording on now. My name is Katie Warren. I'm with the State Head Start ECAP Association, and happy to host this call. Lynn?
So I'm Lynn Huntington, and I'm the Head Start Director here, actually in Yakima. And so I oversee the Migrant Seasonal Head Start Program, the Early Head Start Program, and the Head Start Program.
Sarah?
Hold on, I'm trying to, okay, now you can see me. I am a family support staff person for ECAP in Grays Harbor County. And I'm also the mobility mentoring coach and lead for our grant.
Where's Grays Harbor County?
Grays Harbor County is southwest of Seattle. So we're like Ocean Shores, Westport, Seabrook, if you've heard any of that. So I'm Aberdeen, Kurt Cobain, all that stuff.
Yep, got it.
I'm in Cosmopolis.
That I haven't heard of.
Well, you should. It's a very
okay, now that I know.
Have to pick up my mail at the P.O. box.
Got it.
All right, Teresa? I don't know if Teresa can speak. I can't unmute her involuntarily. So, all right, Cleo, how about you?
So I'm Cleo, and I'm the Executive Director of the National Migrant Seasonal Head Start Association. And I returned to that role after being gone for almost 2 years. So I've been back over a year now. And, you know, I think I've always shared this. It's like, for number one, I felt like I never left. And number two, I'm so glad to be back. So it's the work that speaks to my heart and it feeds my soul. And you know, as we get older, that's more important to me than anything. It's just making sure that I'm doing work that is important to me and that feeds my soul. So, you know, having spent almost 2 years running our local chamber was interesting. It was fun. It was interesting. But man, those are some crotchety old people. And it was not, you know, I mean, I would have happily continued to do it because I was watching them change and I was watching them like blow their minds because like there's a gay Hispanic Democrat running our chamber. Like, what the hell is that all about, you know? So it was like, it was fun to watch them, their minds get expanded a little bit. But when I had the opportunity to come back to Head Start, it was an easy choice. It's what I love doing. So, but you know, it's interesting for us, and I'll just kind of share with you all. And at any point, if you have a question or something that you want to ask, just ask. You know, we had our annual conference back in early March. It was I can't remember the date, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, somewhere in that range in San Diego, and it was just right about the time when stuff was starting to. We were hearing a little bit about it, and we heard a little bit about it. But we really didn't pay that much attention. You know, we kind of like, honestly, I'm going to be honest. I was kind of like, wash your hands, whatever. Lynn, I think you were there, weren't you? You were there. And you remember kind of, we were joking about, wash your hands, wash your hands. Yeah. Well, little did we know what we were facing, what we were coming up against, right? We just had no idea. And so we kind of, you know, nobody social distance. You go tell a bunch of Latinos to social distance. Yeah, it's not going to happen, okay? Because we just don't, you know, and especially in migrant programs where you can be non-Latino, but you still get the culture and you understand, like we touch and we, you know, are very close and we do, early childhood, I guess maybe is just a better umbrella to, that's how we are. That's what we do. That's who we are. And so, you know, it was unbelievable that we left that conference. The timing, number one, was incredible because a week later, we would have been in a totally different situation. Like we would have just been in a totally different situation. And I think we ended up having maybe about 20 people that didn't come because of COVID, you know, the uncertainty of it. But most people showed up and then once everybody left, and it dawned on me like, oh crap, I probably should check in and make sure people are okay. and nobody reported having had any problems or anything that were related to the conference. So we were very pleased with that. But man, did the crap hit the fan almost immediately once we all got back. And for the migrant programs, most of them were kind of wrapping up their season in March. Like those programs that run the Florida program, some of the Texas programs that run those winter months, they were like in the phase of getting ready to start shutting down. And many of our programs were in the phase of like getting ready for pre-service to start up in May. Like for a lot of them have May 1st, May 15th, May 1st opening periods, or June or something like that. Like, so we were kind of in this really interesting gray area, whereas most programs were in the thrust of their service calendar. We were kind of in this like gray area of our service calendar. So those programs that they were still in their service calendar were trying to figure out, do they shut down? Eventually all the programs ended up shutting down just because most of them are mandated because of state mandates, that they ended up like, okay, we have to shut down. And they did. And so, and just like all the other organizations, we were scrambling to figure out how are we going to support our programs. What resources do we need? What do we need to provide to the programs? And so, we pretty much quickly, started to be creative on how we were going to approach this. And because of our alliance with a lot of the farm worker communities, that's really what we focused on, was the farm workers, because what we recognized was that the Head Start programs were going to get the support that they needed from the Office of Head Start. Like that was going to be a given. Head Start was not going to fall behind on making sure that programs were supported. I was really worried about our farm worker families. That's really where my concern came in. And so I was on all these different phone calls and all these different webinars or Zoom calls with all of our farm worker partners, Farm Worker Justice, AFOB, the Association of Farm Worker Opportunity Programs, Justice for Migrant Women. These are just some of the ones that we found ourselves having all these conversations with. And we were making all of these decisions. They were like, well, let's do this, and let's, because at that time, it was just about when Congress was starting to talk about a stimulus bill and how were we going to respond to the needs of families. And we wanted to make sure that we had input in these particular pieces of legislation that related to farm worker families. So we're making all these decisions. And then I was like, has anybody asked the farm workers what they want? Like, we could be trying to push down Diet Coke and they really just want water, nobody's asking them what they want. So I was like, put a pause on this and let's go back and let's ask the farm worker families what they need, right? And so we put together a parent town hall. And usually when we put together our parent meetings, we have 20 people and we feel like that's a success. I think we had 100 and either 34 or 54, I can't remember how many it was, but it was a huge number of parents that got on all over the country from every stretch of the United States. Were on a Zoom call, and 85% of them were actually on the Zoom part of it, because you also have the option of making the phone call in, which gave me good information that our parents have the capacity, and Lynn knows this, I'm sure, they know how to use their phone. That phone is a lifeline, and they know how to access technology. That is a huge lifeline, and I've always known that, but it was clearly demonstrated that evening when we had 100 plus of them on this telephone call. And we really just kind of opened it up as a listening session, right? We just basically asked them, like, what's going on in your community and what do you need from us? Like, how can we help you? And we literally just, we planted a couple of feedback from a couple of parents, and we pretty much just opened it up. And it's a dangerous, as Lynn can share with you, it's dangerous to open it up to a bunch of Latino parents that you give them an open mic, because we could have been there for easily 5 hours listening. But they did a good job of really, sharing and not duplicating. If somebody said Diet Coke, nobody repeated it. Nobody really did a duplicate. They did a really fine job of keeping the comments succinct and focused. And so what we walked away with was three basic baskets, as we call them, kind of like these baskets of where we really saw these emerging trends that the parents shared with us. And one of them was they were so concerned about their older children. They had high school kids, middle school age kids, and elementary school age kids that were now at home homeschooling, right? And trying to understand the concept of homeschooling for one thing, and then recognizing that their children, that their older children, did not have the tools that they needed to be successful, uh, uh, accessing the internet, accessing the lessons that were going to be taught online, accessing, having the hardware to the computer and the software and all these things that they were going to, that most people took for granted that families had. Our families didn't have, a lot of them didn't have that access, and so we really saw that was a huge concern for our parents, and they really were sharing a lot of things like, we feel like our rights are being violated because our kids should have access to this education, and now they don't have access to this education that is, a guaranteed right. So it was interesting that was a huge concern. Another one that kind of emerged was the unfortunate part was that because kids were back at home and because our Head Start centers had closed, somebody needed to stay and be caregiver at home. And across the board, I mean, I don't think that there was one, it wasn't the case where it was a mom that actually was quit her job so that she could be home with the kids, right? And in some cases, they gave the responsibility to their high school age kids. But from what I've heard since then is that a lot of them, the moms ended up quitting anyway, just because they didn't feel like it was fair to the high school kids to have this additional responsibility. So what we saw was, okay, so this means that families are losing a portion of their income. It's very inequitable. It's gender inequitable because it's mostly, or in all cases, it was the women that were having to compromise their employment. And so, and then we, from the migrant programs, started to look at it from a perspective of, because some of the moms were saying, well, yeah, but I've gone to go get a job, maybe shelving grocery stores overnight, because dad is home now, home from the fields. I'm taking on this overnight job that's out of agriculture, but I'm going to, to continue getting money into the house. And the challenge that's going to create for our migrant programs down the road, because of the fact that it is mandated by law that 51% of a family's income has to come from agriculture, and that might change. Come. We're not going to see it immediately, but we're going to see this come down the road here. And so that was an interesting lesson learned or insight that we gathered from having this conversation with the parents about the other income sources that families are tapping into that may compromise their eligibility in the future. So it's something that we're really trying to navigate now. So and in that second basket, so that first one really was was their education basket of their kids, right? The second basket was the income, right? The fact that they've lost their income, the fact that food scarcity was a reality, although migrant programs were still, like all the other programs, still providing food and meals, but it still wasn't going to be enough. Like, families still had concerns about having access to food, and then they also shared a lot of they had heard a lot about these $1,200 stimulus payments that people were getting, but understanding and recognizing that they were not going to be eligible for those because of their status, because so many of our families have mixed status when it comes to documentations and stuff. So they were very concerned about that, because they thought, well, it's so unfair that others are getting it, and yet we're going to be left once again off the list of folks that are able to tap into these resources. So that was another a concern for them, was that one. And then the third one that we recognized was the concern around their own mental health and the mental health of their children. Like they were so in tune to understanding that kids were confused. You know, their routines have been completely disrupted. They've lost their social aspect of our programming. You know, they've all of this has been changed, and it was changed overnight. And so they were really concerned about their the social, emotional, and the mental health of their children, as well as themselves, because what was happening when we were having this conversation is that farm workers were then becoming deemed as essential workers, which meant that they were going to continue to have to be and they wanted to be working, but they also wanted to be protected in the workplace, and that wasn't happening. They just weren't getting the kinds of protections that they needed in the workplace in terms of the social distancing, the ability to wash their hands, the face mask, you know, the sanitation, hand sanitation, you know, liquids or whatever. They just weren't having access to this. And so, and I can remember one particular dad said he was working in a dairy, and he said, you know, people were getting really sick. People were getting sick. And he was asking for, you know, give us a mask or give us something so we can protect ourselves, because we're going to, you're going to have a breakdown in production if you don't protect your workforce, right? And this is one of the parents, in fact, I think it was one of your parents, Lynn, that was saying this, that you know, was trying to help the employer understand, like, there's going to be a breakdown in production if you don't protect the workforce. And the employer's just not really being that concerned about it. And so I from what I understood, he actually quit his job and went and found a different job that would, you know, give him a little more protection, because they realized how vulnerable they were, right? And then the reality sets in of, you know, if I get sick, again, yes, my income is going to suffer, but the medical issues that are going to be, you know, have to face, and the medical cost and all that, and the may or may not have medical insurance and all this. So we watched it become a really big concern within our community, with our families, because of the lack of resources and stuff. So fast forward to taking all this information, right? And so what we did was we actually then followed up with this, I think it was about an hour and a half webinar on knowing your rights, knowing your educational rights. We worked with the Mexican American Legal Defense Education Fund on doing this webinar. And I think on that one, we had 150 something parents that jumped on, so that they could understand, and we did it exclusively in Spanish, so that they could understand what their rights were and what things to ask for as their children are, you know, being, you know, brought back to school or going to return back in the fall, and what they could expect, and how they needed to approach their educational systems to make sure that their rights were not violated. So that was a very important webinar that we had. Another one that we did was in response to the mental health stuff, and this is one of them, and we're actually going to do another one. But one of the ones that and this was kind of really way out of our wheelhouse, and was way out of our spectrum of things that we would do, but I thought it was important, was we kind of did this very culturally specific cleansing type of thing, right? Like we call them in the Latino community, we call them a curandero, right? And it's kind of like this healer, right? This cultural healer. And so we kind of made contact with some in Los Angeles, and we invited them to do this virtual healing with our parents. And it was incredible. It was genuinely incredible. Like, and we didn't have as many as I wanted. Like, and again, I think it's because it was out of our wheelhouse, and they're like, what the hell is Cleo doing, you know? But in hindsight, I wish that there would have been more, because because it's so culturally important to our families this is an important part of healing for our families. This is an important part of mental health, is this healer and these curanderos and these rituals that are so important to our community, that I wish more would have taken advantage of that opportunity. And it's not to say we won't do it again, because we probably will, but it was fun to do it. It was interesting to do it. But we also are doing another mental health, social and emotional webinar with our parents, and we're using actually like PhDs in social emotional development and stuff. So a little bit of a different approach, and I would rather be a part of a curandero than I really would a PhD. Just my opinion. Anyway, so that's another response that we've done. But so then fast forward to where we were having opportunity to have input on some of these pieces of legislation that went through, and we've been really pushing really hard on our legislators to give additional funds to the migrant and seasonal Head Start programs, because and it's just like all the other Head Start programs, except this is our high season right now. Right now it is our high season. This is when most of our programs are in operation. Lit is probably on some level in operations right now, and this is when it's happening for our programs. And so we're saying, we really need access to additional funding. We need access to additional resources that are going to provide internet services, that are going to provide the equipment that families need in order to be able to continue not miss the educational gaps. And so we're pushing really hard on Congress right now. We've got the ear of Senator Booker out of New Jersey that is putting some language together. We've given him the language already to put in a Senate bill, where worked with Nancy Pelosi's office in the House to get very similar language into their pieces of legislation. And so we're really pushing hard at the congressional level to get some of these resources that we need for our programs, so that we can get some additional funding down to the local level. Again, whether we see it happen or not, I suspect that we're going to see something, just because we've got so many of our advocates pushing for this, that I suspect that we'll see something. And it's been interesting to watch how many different other organizations and partner organizations that have come to aid us and to back us up and to leverage. We've been able to leverage each other's energy and contacts on Capitol Hill to really push our agenda, so to speak, forward to get additional resources. So if I can say one thing that has been beneficial with all of this chaos is, number one, it stretched our ability to understand how to work and meet virtually like we're doing right now, right? Like this is like, we would have never thought that we would be doing this 6 months ago, right? And it's really expanded our thinking and it's possible. It is possible to do this and to be successful. And for us, it's been a real opportunity to partner with organizations, or to elevate that partnership. Like we've had partnerships, but we've really watched them just elevate as we, co-advocate for the farm worker community. So, and we're actually going to host a couple of 3 more telephone calls with parents, because we feel like it's another opportunity now. Like a lot of time has passed since this whole thing surfaced, that it's probably a good time now to check in again with our families and say, okay, where are you now? What do you need? Because this need is not going to go away. This pandemic is not, we're going to see it maybe, the impact's going to lessen, but the impact on our farm worker community, I think, is going to be long lasting, because of the nature of the work that we do, and the fact that they haven't been able to protect themselves at the level that most of us have, where we've been able to stay home and continue making our income and all that. They haven't had that advantage. They have to continue to be up in the workforce and be vulnerable, and so I think it's going to be a lot longer lasting impact in our farm worker community than it is just in general population. One of the things that we've been really pushing is helping people understand is that the work that our families do, and Lynn can speak to this as equally passionate as I can, is that, you know, as far as last time I checked, everybody likes to eat, right? And everybody likes to eat fresh fruits and vegetables. And that's the work that our families do, right? And so we have to protect the food supply, the food chain, by protecting the workers that are putting that food on your table. And so, and that has resonated pretty strongly on Capitol Hill. It's like, you want to pay, I paid $1.79, I think, for a box of strawberries the other day. But I know that the true value of that is $8, really. You know, if you were going to pay a living wage to the farm worker that picked it and all that. And so, but if you want to continue to have this unlimited access to fresh fruits and vegetables at a economically advantaged price, you better take care of the farm workers, because without them, you're not going to have access to these fruits and vegetables. You're not going to have access to the dairy products that we take for granted. And so when we start, you know, pushing it that way on the hill, we seem to get a little bit more traction with folks. So you know, it's to me, it's been just fascinating to watch all this, you know, unfold, and just again watching the partners that we've been able to leverage, and watching the programs, right? A lot of our programs are open already, and in fact, we're going to do. Lynn doesn't know this yet, and I may reach out to her, because we're going to do a national webinar for Head Start, because what's very interesting for Migrant Head Start is that Migrant Head Start, we're the first ones to serve infants and toddlers. We've never not served infants and toddlers, right? From day one back in 1969, we were serving infants and toddlers, and we were serving preschoolers, right? We conceived the birth to school age model. That was our, you know, that's what we've always done. We've always done extended days. We've always done summer programming. We've always done these, you know, transportation. There's a lot of things that have always been done in Migrant Head Start that regular Head Start then follows, right? And so it's not by accident, I think, that we ended up being the first ones to open up our doors. There's a lot of lessons learned, and I was on the call with all our CEOs earlier this week, and it's fascinating to hear some of the stories that they're sharing, that I thought this is valuable to our Head Start community in general, so that we can learn what has worked for our programs in terms of trying to open up the doors, what lessons they've learned, what they would do again, what they wouldn't do, you know, how they would change it. I think we can learn a lot from our migrant programs because of the fact that so many of them are opening now as we speak. So, and I'll share that information with Joel and with Katie, so that they can share it wide, so that those folks that want to get in, you know, tune in would tune in to hear what's going on and what they can learn from our programs.
Yeah, we're right on the same page, Cleo. We've been talking about that with Lynn and other programs who have opened up about talking about doing a webinar or a series to help folks who are going to be opening up in the fall. I would have done it earlier, but it's been a complete disaster area in Yakima recently, and I haven't wanted to bother them.
Oh yeah. Oh no, I hear about the chaos in Yakima. And Lynn, I would love to hear tell me a little bit about what's going on in Yakima.
Well, I got a couple things I want to just share, because Cleo, you did an amazing job. You shared a lot.
Oh, sorry.
A couple things. Also, not only are we the migrant programs being looked at for Head Start, but we're actually being looked at for the K-12 system too. And so a lot of the work that we've been doing, there's a group of us, and Cleo, I'd love to invite you or Katie. We meet now 2 times a week with a whole group of us out of the Yakima area that are all focused in on early learning. We're calling it the Early Learning Pandemic meeting, and we we meet on Tuesdays and Fridays now for like an hour, and I'll send you guys an invite and if you ever want to join it. But it's been a group of us from private childcare. Inspire's been actively involved. We've been involved in it. Now we got Catholic Charities that are involved. We have the state licensing office involved. We have ECAP Partners, which is a state program. So it's been really good. So we've been able to, we got mental health services involved. So we've been able to continually talk on a weekly basis and give each other things that are working and not working. And people have just been openly honest about challenges they've had when they've opened and things that have worked and things that are not working. And we've shared resources and everything. So it's been an amazing, amazing group. It's kind of almost been a mental health support group. And we are even talking about after COVID. It's been such a great group that we're even talking about after COVID meeting even like once a week, just around whole early learning. Yeah. So that's been great. And we have the, we have the ESD here. And so we have the nurse that is responsible to all the school districts in our region. And so she meets with us on that call. So it's just been fantastic. So I'll invite you guys to that, and hopefully you guys can join us at some point just to hear what's going on with that group. The other thing is that we were going to open. We had all these plans. We were going to smaller group sizes. Inspire had opened, obviously, Cleo, and then they had 5 of their centers that had come down with either staff or family members, and they had to close. And that was like when they closed, we were just getting ready to open on that Monday. And we said, we're going to halt everything. And so we are just doing everything still right now remote, hoping that once we move out of maybe the phase 1, then we would try to get back to services. We've actually had a couple of families that, because mom's so worried that they're staying home, that they want just remote services now. They don't even want center-based services. So that's been kind of interesting to talk about. The other thing I was thinking of, Cleo, as you were talking about meeting with the parents, I think the one piece that you are so articulate, the one piece that I was thinking would be really interesting is to work with each of the national programs and find out who are national leaders in agriculture. So like we have in the state of Washington, we have the Washington Growers League, and there's a gentleman by the name of Mike Gempler that is amazing, understands the importance of the migrant population and the seasonal population, and he's the one that has the ear of like the warehouses and stuff like that. So I was thinking if we could put together a group across the country of those people, their associations or leagues or whatever, that are the influencers to the individual warehouses or packing plants or dairies or whatever, and have these conversations there, that might be a really, really powerful thing. And I know that Dan Newhouse would also probably be a part of that, because Dan Newhouse is out of Sunnyside, and his family has farms. So I think we could put something like that together, Cleo, to have a really powerful impact.
That's a good thought, because I have got a good contact in Florida, and I've got a pretty good one in Southern California too. So that might be an interesting, I think our programs would love to hear, you know, because that was one of the things that happened pretty early on, was this grower out of, I reached out to that grower in Southern California. And it was amazing to see what they were doing, right? Like some of the things that they did to respond, and it was actually pretty responsible. Like I was very impressed with the response that they were taking, and you know, and it was, and what was weird, what was hard was information was changing by the day, right? It was like we were having to be quickly responding. Like one day we were not essential workers, and the next day we're essential workers, and you have to have a ID that says that you can be on the road. I mean, it was just bizarre, the pace at which we were having to be responsive, and how these growers were having to be responsive. So it might be interesting. That's an idea. It's a good thought.
Well, and I think that there are a lot of growers and smaller farmers and stuff that have been very responsive, but then you always have the big ones, or the ones that get the bad reputation, and then it makes it look like everybody's bad. Because I just know of ourselves, and that's what's been hard. And I've even heard, like, because we have a couple formants, and even some of the frustrations within the culture, and making sure that the communication is getting out. And I think that's also been a huge challenge, because things have been changing so rapidly. you know, just by being on all these Zooms. And if you're not getting that accurate communication, because at the very beginning it was like, don't wear a mask. Then, you know, a week later it's like, wear a mask. And it's like, don't touch anything. And then we find out that there's nothing on the you know. So I think that that's also been a huge part across every, you know, all sectors of society. So I think that's been another challenge, but I think that would just be an idea that I have. And I think Cleo, not only for COVID, but I think that that would be just a great group to get together for the future.
It is. And that's probably been one of the biggest challenges with us, the association, is that, you know, we always want to be involved with, we always want the growers because they're such a powerful voice.
Yes.
And then we get a couple of them and we work with them and then we lose them, you know, and
Right.
they get distracted by something else. And I you know, it's our fault for not really fostering those alliances. So, but
Well,
I'm gonna do, Lynn, is I'm gonna send an email to you and I and to Allison.
okay.
And let's start that conversation.
Okay, that would be great.
So I have, so I'm interested in, so one of the things that's been coming up that we've been getting questions about, we certainly hear about from programs and both Migrant Seasonal and our state pre-K and our other Head Start, is about this technology gap piece and the ability to, the equity associations with that as well, right? And I love the idea of your know your right, know your education right webinar. I wonder if you can talk a little bit more about that. Can you share that webinar? Did you record it? And
no, actually, we did. It's all in Spanish, though. That's the, so it's all, you know, I didn't get on that one because I had something else that I was doing. But I believe that it was all in Spanish. But yeah, I'll ask my office to share it with you guys, because it might be on our website by now, but I'm not sure. But
yeah, that would be great. I love that idea. We can consider doing something like that in English as well.
The families were really concerned because, you know, it's not uncommon for our kids our families to have experience or to be dealing with like the dual language learners, and a lot of times kids get identified through either 504 or special education and their IEPs and all that. And so there were some really concerns about that too. Like, well, you know, we know that our kids are not getting this particular service and they should, as you know, it's mandated by law. It was interesting. I'll happily share that. Let me make a note here.
And
yeah.
Katie, one other thing I'm thinking with that, when you were talking about the older kids, and one thing that's been really, really fortunate with the ESD 105 taking over the contract is, and Cynthia Juarez is in charge of the Migrant Ed. And so there's staff, and there's actually some of the stuff that you were just sharing about that. But I think it would also be awesome if we could partner through this with Migrant Ed, because those kids, once they leave our programs, they're in Migrant Ed. And so if we could figure out a way to do that, and I was actually thinking we should, here in the state, I could get those people a part of the conversation with this, because the families are also being stressed and challenged with their older kids. That's really impacting us too. So
absolutely.
Another idea.
Yeah. Yeah, and now that we have our issues in Head Start and Migrant Seasonal and ECAP around to what extent we're going to be continuing to do remote services, and so what kind of technology do preschoolers need to have, right? And what kind of technology do our staff need to have, many of whom were not set up at home with the proper amount of Wi-Fi and all of that. So I do think that's a big issue here as well. And I'm very interested in what you're lobbying for in DC around that technology gap issue. So share anything that you are.
Most of it is simply just resources, just money to give the programs the opportunity to ask for it. I mean, to just have that flexibility to be able to, you know, get these additional dollars and use it for those exact things that you just mentioned, Katie, because that's what, and I know it's not just a migrant issue. No. It's a big rural issue, you know, and I'm sure it's a big urban issue too, but you know, you happen to, it has a bigger presence in the rural communities and you know, in our migrant communities, just because that exists already, and then this just kind of exacerbated it, and it really just exposed it on a much grander scale than we've ever had before, you know.
Yeah, I'm definitely hearing it from Grays Harbor County, right? Even Sarah,
oh yeah,
this is a huge issue
yep.
on the peninsula.
One of the interesting things, I had a interview the other day with a reporter, and she was harping on this, like, you know, and then she wasn't doing it in a negative way, but it was like, oh, kids are staying behind, and I wanted, and so I had this thought, and then I thought, oh, that was a brilliant thought, right? If I have to say so myself, I'm sure I read it somewhere, and I can't even take credit for it, but I don't remember where I read it from. But it was kind of like, I thought, you know, I'm not really worried about our kids academically. I really am not, because you know what? So they had a different way of learning for 2 or 3 months, right? I'm more worried about the social emotional part of their being, because that has a bigger impact, right? Because everything's been disrupted. There's all this chaos. There's jobs are lost. And kids are not. They're not sheltered from all of that. Like they have access to all this because through TV and internet and all this stuff, right? So they're not immune to that. They're in tune to what's going on. And I think, because I think that when kids get back to school, the teachers are going to do their job. They're going to catch them up. That's what they do. They know how to do that. What we need to really help parents do is to, you know, feed the social emotional need of their children. That's what I want. Like, if that's what we can keep kids, I don't care if they don't read for the next 2 months, but let's protect their beings. Let's protect their mental health, because it has a bigger, longer impact. And so she actually liked it. She was like, oh, that's a great idea, whatever. Anyway, that was my thoughts.
Yeah, you said you did a webinar about that as well, about mental health.
Yeah, well, we're getting ready to do one for our parents on the 30th, actually. We did a virtual, we did the cleanse, remember the very cleanse and stuff, you know, that people were raising their eyebrow at me for, but I was like, I don't care. It's pandemic.
Put on with the rest of the folks, but I do think so. I mean, we have a huge Spanish-speaking population in Head Start, ECAP, Early Head Start, and our migrant seasonal programs, obviously. We've been doing interpretation on a lot of our regular webinars, and certainly everything in our Parent Ambassador program is interpreted in all of our parent events. But yeah, if you're open to having other folks come to that, I would share that with our Spanish-speaking folks. You probably wouldn't get a huge number, but
if we get 2 or 3, that's a big deal.
Okay, well, send that our way too, because
I'm all about it. I'm not about hogging resources. I love sharing resources, because there is never a reason why to reinvent the wheel. If you're saying, what is he doing? It's because I'm gonna send an email right now. Well, I'll wait in case anybody else has any more questions or thoughts. Let me see. So June 30th webinar. Share with Katie. You guys have given me all this. Thank you very much.
Yeah. And we send out a regular weekly email to all of our folks that has resources. And I don't think I've connected with them to anything for the Migrant Seasonal Head Start. But now that I know about the stuff that you guys are doing, I would love to be able to provide that mental health webinar for parents.
I would imagine it's going to be in Spanish. 90% of our parents are Spanish. So
yeah, no, that's good.
They understand it fluently. So
yeah, and I'll watch your Know Your Rights thing. I'm actually interested in the legal aspects of that and whether or not we're going to see any litigation related to. So I don't know whether you guys are thinking through that or whether that's more your partners who are thinking through what that might look like.
So we've had a little bit of soft dialogue about it, just because it's, you know, it gets real tricky. But yeah, I mean, it's not something that's not on our radar.
There's already a lot around special ed. Around special ed, there has been a lot. There's one attorney here in the state of Washington that there's already like 80 to 100.
We lost you, Lynn.
Oh.
I'm not sure why, but I think you were talking about how that special ed is, there's been a lot of conversation about litigation related to equity in special ed and whether or not those services were being provided under the law. And I think that's absolutely true. I hear it over and over again. Yep. Other questions out there? Well, this has been really great, Cleo. Lots of good information, and it's great to hear what you guys are up to. And I look forward to seeing what else you guys are doing and opportunities to partner on some of this work. This is all these things are a big priority for us as well. And we've been working on and I'll send you some of the stuff that we've been working on as well that relates to what we're doing. We had several of our staff folks, and our staff person who does our parent coordination and interpretation, Maricela, put together they decided that our community was not up to speed sufficiently on things related to all of the nomenclature of immigration and you know, what's DACA, what's an ITIN, what's, you know, all of these things. And so they did a presentation in English for English family support staff and other staff to understand how to work with immigrant families if you were not of the same ethnicity. And so that was nice as well.
There's a lot of work to be done, and we can continue. I mean, we're always going to be responding to the needs of families because they change all the time. So,
yeah, absolutely.
I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you guys, and I always if you know Joel asks, I always say yes. Joel, you know, that's my buddy. So, whatever Joel wants, I always say yes. So.
Well, thank you very much.
If you're ever on a Zoom meeting with Joel, his name actually comes up as Crazy Joel.
He's pretty accurate. So I would agree with that.
Yes.
But that's a charming thing about him, is he's crazy.
Yes.
Yeah, I just thought
and
you were.
Go ahead, Sarah.
Oh, I just thought that Cleo was in Washington State, but you're in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
Right? Oh, okay. No wonder you didn't know where Grace Harbor is. Come on.
No. I spent a lot of time in Washington State because my husband is from Spokane, so.
Oh, okay.
We're in Washington a lot, but I don't think we've been there yet to that part of. I mean, we've been to Seattle and all that space, but not. Yeah. Not Grace Harbor.
Yeah, you got to go 2 hours southwest to the beach area to get to where we are. But yeah, I went to school in Spokane at Whitworth.
Ah, okay. So you were one of those brainiacs then.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Cleo, and thank you for everybody who attended. And we're going to put this up on our YouTube, and we'll share out the link to folks. Oh, Teresa's from Head Start in Spokane.
Okay. How wonderful. I was just there the other day, Teresa, in Spokane, and man, the weather was like perfect. I mean, it was perfect. So, anyway, you guys take care.
Well,
Thank you again.
Have a great weekend, everyone.
Thank you.
Keep up the good work.
Weekend.
Have a great day.
Bye-bye.